Welcome to Hello World. We are usually taught that Hello World is where things begin. In reality, it's where things stop being simple. This podcast is a coffee conversation about what comes after real systems, real teams, and the technical decisions that actually shape day to day work. Here with me today, we have Majo Francis, Engineering Manager at MicroGenesis, and we are going to talk about Forge development. Hi, Majo. Welcome to Hello World. How are you today?
Hi, Girish. I'm great. Thank you.
Great. Forge is often described as a shift from vendor-managed infrastructure to platform-managed execution. How does that change the way developers should fundamentally think about app architecture?
This shift represents a fundamental move from distributed system management to serverless function as a service orchestration. This marks a transition from the Connect era, where the primary concern was keeping the lights on, that is, maintaining a bridge between two distinct clouds, to a native era where the app is an extension of the host product itself. In the Atlassian Connect model, we likely designed apps as long-running stateful services, often using Spring Boot or Node, hosted on AWS Heroku. With Forge, we must adopt a stateless architecture, because Forge is built on a fast model utilizing AWS Lambda under the hood, of course. So code only runs in response to specific triggers. So we can no longer rely on, say, in-memory caching or local file system, right? So every function execution must be treated independence. So this shift focuses developers to optimize the apps for execution time limits and cold starts. So moving logic away from those monolithic processing towards a more modular, event-driven architecture. So to summarize, with Forge, our architecture is now focused on entirely the logic, while Atlassian provides industrial-grade, security, data residency, etc.
Great. I'm talking about data residency. Security is built into Forge by design rather than layered on later, right? So how does that alter the trust model between Atlassian app developers and customers?
In the traditional Atlassian Connect model, the vendor was responsible for building a security perimeter around the app. So with Forge, security is structural to the platform, not just contractual. In the vendor-managed model, customers are to trust your company's individual security posture, your SOC 2 compliance, your database encryption, and your employee access policies. So with Forge, the customer doesn't have to trust your infrastructure because your code runs inside Atlassian security perimeter. So one of the most radical shifts in Forge is the content security policy and the egress controls. So by default, Forge app cannot send data to any external URLs unless explicitly declared in the manifest. So in past, an app could secretly exfiltrate data to third-party servers. So Forge makes this very hard, right, for external interactions unless declared clearly in the manifest file. So this creates a transparency, and the customers know exactly where their data is allowed to go. So the customer is sure that no data is leaking outside the Atlassian infrastructure. Also, Forge apps uses the as user patterns. So as a user ensures that the app can only perform actions that the current user is actually allowed to do.
Correct.
So you can no longer have to build complex permission checking logic, that is to see if user A can see issue B, or the platform ensures this permissions via the token scope. And also this protects the developer from privilege escalation bugs. The customer trusts that the app is an extension of their own user permission rather than a super bot running around in the background.
What mistakes do first-time Forge developers tend to repeat?
The most frequent mistake for veterans is trying to move a Connect apps logic to Forge without re-architecture. Right. So, for example, the mistake of expecting the backend to maintain the state or handle long-running process like a 5-minute data sync. Forge functions have a hard timeout limits, right? So, first timers often see their functions killed in the mid-execution because they didn't implement like a chunking or backing strategy, right, using async events API. So, we have to move from a asynchronous request response mindset to a synchronous event-driven one. So, next one is the over-reliance on key value storage. So Forge offers a built-in key value store, KVS, which is incredibly easy to use, but it has strict limits. So the mistake is using KVS for complex relational data or large data sets. So in reality, KVS is best for simple settings or small flags. So if you try to build a reporting engine out of KVS, you will have a hard time hitting the limits and etc. So there you have to move to maybe Forge SQL or other options.
Got it. Compared to Connect, Forge introduces clearer boundaries and constraints. Where do those constraints meaningfully improve outcomes? And where do they require a mindset shift from builders?
One area where this outcome is visible in the predictable performance of Forge. Connect apps often suffered from a lag if the vintage server was underpowered. So Forge introduced hard execution timeout limits for synchronous functions. Users get a consistent experience because the platform prevents any single app from hanging a Jira issue or Confluence page. Outcome improves significantly through transparency and trust. In the Connect model, security was a contract, right? So customers had to trust your brand and your AWS setup. Forge replaces this with the security by architecture. Because your app's external calls must be declared in the manifest.yml, the security reviews are compressed from weeks of questionnaires to a simple, check the manifest exercise.
Okay, at what point does choosing Forge stop being a technical preference and start become a long-term strategic decision?
Choosing Forge moves from a preference to a strategy when the decision involves market viability, enterprise trust, and AI readiness. Choosing Forge is a strategic decision when you want your app to live in the Atlassian teamwork graph rather than just a single Jira work item view. In the Connect model, your app was a silo. In the Forge model, your data can be indexed by Atlassian Rovo and surfaced in cross-product search. If your long-term goal is to build a system of work that connects Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket, Forge is the only choice. You aren't building a plugin anymore, you're building a platform app.
Great. So as Forge apps move from experiments to production critical systems, what challenges start to appear that aren't obvious early on?
In Connect, if your app became popular, you just scaled your AWS cluster. In Forge, the platform limits, invocation, storage, async events are often per installation and do not scale automatically with customer size. A critical app for a 50,000 user Jira instance is the same execution limit and storage throughput caps as a 10 user Jira instance. So you may find that your apps work perfectly for 90% of the customers, but fails for the top 1% due to rate limiting like forwarding errors. So you must architect limit-aware logic that detects throttling and gracefully degrades or queues the task. So while fast scales well, it suffers from cold starts, the delay when the function is initialized after being idle, right? So for an experimental app, a 2-second delay is fine. However, for a production critical issue action, right? That's triggered by users 100 times a day, the delay becomes a major user experience concern. And I would say another challenge would be the observability gap during debugging, right? Accessing Forge production logs is now opt-out by default, even though customers can block it. So when a high-tier customer reports a bug, you may not have the logs to see why it is happening. That's another major pain point, I would say.
So how does Forge influence long-term maintainability and operational overhead compared to self-managed app options?
Okay, Atlassian has already clearly signaled that Forge is the successor to Connect. So building a new app on Connect today is essentially a technical debt by design. So if your product map extends beyond 24 months, starting with Forge is a strategic decision to avoid any costly migration later. As of 2026, Atlassian Marketplace revenue share model has shifted to favor Forge. So Atlassian is offering 100% incentives or revenue share for the Forge apps qualifying runs on Atlassian model. And also when you're calculating your burn rate versus profitability, the lack of hosting cost and the higher revenue share on the marketplace makes Forge a financial strategy, not just a coding choice.
Hey Majo, thank you so much for being with us today, and hope to see you once again at Hello World. And everyone, thanks a lot for watching us. Until next time, see you.